Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Adventure Prep stream. I'm Timothy from ProDM, and today we are going to be we're going to be trying to figure out something to entertain my 10-year-old players in the magical, magnificent castle that they stole. Great, so this is one of my two groups of kids. If you've never been to a session prep stream before, welcome. The idea here is that we're just going to talk through some ideas for an upcoming session that I have. I am one of those people who needs to does brainstorming much better when I talk out loud. And so normally I would pester my poor wife with this stuff near constantly. And so I've decided to sublimate some of that. I still pester her quite a bit into a stream that we do. We're going to start doing weekly. I'm thinking Tuesdays right now. That may change. The time may change as well. But we are going to be talking today about an upcoming session that I have for one of my two younger sessions. Hey, what's up, David? Thanks for coming out. So I have two groups of children that I run on Tuesdays and Thursdays once a month, and I have for about the past 6 months. And they are some of my most interesting and challenging players that I've ever run for. And so they especially kind of need some extra guidance when it comes to coming up with adventures that are fun and engaging for them because their playstyle is so different. I've talked about this a lot, either on Twitter or on Patreon or on Medium, talking about what it's like to run for kids. I've kind of started to get into the groove now, I feel like, but it will take a long time, I think, before I really can understand or even remotely accurately predict how they're going to react to different things. But anyway, so let's catch you guys up. I have two groups. One of them has, for the past couple of months, been kind of contending with an organization called the Dragon Slayers, who are a very overtly, cartoonishly villainous organization who are seeking to slay all dragons in the world because they believe dragons to be a dangerous force of destruction. They're not entirely wrong, but, sort of an anti-conservationist, pro-poaching organization. Anyway, they have been in conflict with these dragon slayers for a long time. The point is that they recently defeated them at their sort of home base, Wyrmspire Citadel, which is this massive, magical kind of centerpiece location. And they have since taken over that citadel for themselves. And so they have this whole massive space that they have kind of free reign over. I've discovered the more I've run for these kids, the more important it is to present them with a bunch of toys and let them kind of play with the toys, as opposed to trying to put them on any kind of a linear quest. Rather than saying, you must do this, you give them 5 or 6 options and say, you can do any of these. Chances are good that they won't engage with any of them, but they may bounce off of those in certain interesting ways or try to combine them into different plots. So that's kind of what I did with this castle. The moment that they inherited it, the idea was that they have free reign over it, and there's all these little rooms and strange sort of devices and characters and toys for them to play with and run around. That's what they did pretty much the entirety of last session. And now this session, we're probably going to get one more of these kind of running around the castle episodes before we shunt them into before I shunt them into our winter camp. So I talked about this a little bit last week. I am running it's now 7-day adventure camp for these kids where we play once a day, 4 days with one group and 3 days with another, which kind of throws the what we talked about into whack. I'll have to figure out what to do there. But the idea we came up with was that it's the kids get basically there's a harmonic convergence. All of the elemental planes line up in such a way that it kind of messes with the fabric of space-time, and the borders between those planes get really thin, and they're kind of drawn through them on this kind of a roller coaster ride through 7 of the different planes before they come back to the material plane. And so it would be cool if we could try to set that up. What's really funny about that, actually, is that I think I tweeted about this morning, that we came up with that on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday I read about how at some point in the month of December, I think it's the 21st, the Jupiter and Saturn are going to align to create like a big bright, I think it's the Christmas star, right, is the idea. It's the star that the wise men supposedly followed on Christmas. And so there is like a harmonic convergence that's happening in December. And what's extra weird is that it's happening on the first day of camp. Like when the convergence will be happening in the game, there will be, Fast and the Furious, there will be a literal convergence outside. And that just blew my mind. Like that's the Norns trying to tell me like, nah man, you got to do this. So that's coming down the pipeline in 2 sessions. And so the idea here is to give them one more session to kind of run around the castle and explore all of its sort of dusty corners. And then they'll go on this wild extraplanar adventure. And then from there, past that, we'll figure out something else to do. So it's kind of like a killing time session in a certain sense. And I basically just wanted to generate some ideas of some plots I could throw at them. I feel pretty comfortable improvising with them inside the castle as it is right now. And we'll talk about some of the ideas I already have. But just some general brainstorming for new things they could encounter. New sort of kid-friendly, creative, fun, like almost like play spaces for them to bounce around and discover things. So let's go through kind of where they're at and what we already have, all the irons we already have in the fire, and then we will talk a little bit more specifically about what we could still add or how we could develop some of those ideas. So last session they started running around and they uncovered a number of things. Wyrmspire Citadel is located on the coast, and so there's this big ocean to the west again, kind of on the west coast. This big ocean with, kind of undeveloped, I haven't even named it, this big massive body of water. That's the weird thing with these kids is they don't really care about lore or specifics. They care about treasure and they care about cool things that they can interact with. So the amount of actual world building I've done for these kids is so minimal. Anyway, so in exploring the Citadel, they discovered a vault. And this vault has a key that it requires. Basically, there's no way to pick it. They tried picking it. They tried forcing it open. There's no way to do it without the key. So the framing device for last session was basically find this key as an excuse for them to explore this castle that they've now taken up residence in. So they ran around and they explored a bunch of different things. Several of the characters, kind of the most noteworthy thing that happened, several of the characters accidentally, through a trap they encountered, teleported themselves, 100 miles or whatever, not that far, maybe a mile out off the coast into the ocean, right? It was basically like a trap that if you touch this thing, you get teleported a mile out to sea, and you're just like swimming and desperate with nothing to do. 3 of the characters ended up triggering that trap and were separated from the party. Long story short, I had developed a little bit of the surrounding area and pulled an NPC from a pirate game I ran years ago, Fast and the Furious. They basically stumbled across a kraken, a massive underwater, giant intelligent squid that fancies itself as like a ship maker. This is a character I've used before, but the idea is that it takes ships that it either wrecks or sunken ships that it finds, and it builds sort of like new ships out of them, kind of like a collector would make models, right? So it's a sort of shipwright kraken that they encountered, named simply Shipmaker. And they encountered it, and it gave them a quest. It said, in the castle, in Wyrmspire Citadel, there's a particular bell that I need to finish and complete this ship that I'm working on. The idea with Shipmaker is that it's this very artistic soul. I really like to do krakens as powerful, yes, but kind of hyper-focused on weirdly specific earthly objects. So they might be into ships, like this one is, or they might be into keys, or scissors, or other strange items that they like to collect and kind of obsess and fascinate over. It helps kind of give them this alien mind. Sort of inspired by China Mieville's Weavers in his Boss Log series. If you haven't read those, check them out. One of my favorite fantasy series. Anyway, so they meet this squid, and the squid offers to build them a ship. It will build a custom vessel for them if they can find this bell and return it to them. So then these 3 characters decide, okay, we're going to go back to Wyrmspire Citadel and we're going to find this bell. Anyway, so they do that, and that was one of the big plot things we have going on. When they got back, one of the characters found a smithy and talked to the magman that was imprisoned in the furnace and got the magman to help them create a new bell that they're probably going to try to give to the kraken as a result. The character was kind of cool because the character finally got to use their smith's tools, which they almost never have a reason to use. So that was exciting. And then let's see. There was a subplot about a pair of dragons One of them trapped in the form of a cat, one of them trapped like in a mural. That's just kind of a background thing in the castle. There's a lot of little fiddly things like that. Several of the characters found a library and encountered the sort of like arcane spirit, this owl, that is sort of the caretaker and librarian of the library. They went through a number of shenanigans in order to get access to the restricted section of the library, which has sort of evil and nefarious tomes. One of the characters, a character named Plank, is a dwarven trickster cleric, and he is very much the party's troublemaker. He's kind of like a lovable scofflaw. He loves to kind of flirt with the idea of going evil or betray the party. He never quite does it, and in another party it might be kind of a worrisome story element, but everyone here has kind of accepted this is just how this guy plays, and he's very good-natured about it. He's just kind of the troublemaker of the group. That's what he enjoys doing. So there's some plot line where he would really like to uncover a sinister, evil tome in the restricted section of the library. So that's one thing we're going to talk about. And then lastly, I have the harmonic convergence is coming up. So this is probably more of a background detail, but I would love to find some ways to kind of herald that this is coming. We might end the session with like the big cliffhanger of like, oh man, the fabric of reality is sort of coming apart and everyone is getting like pulled into these different realms, right? But I feel like that's pretty easily done as just you see weird things in the sky. Like something is going on. They don't have any ability to like change or control it. But we do have a number of remaining rooms here, if you guys can see that. I still haven't changed my overlay, so it may be too small. Let me know if you can read it okay. But there are a number of rooms that I developed for the previous session that they didn't actually get a chance to interact with. So those are also options, and I have those listed here. One of them, I have it here listed as Draco. But one of the last things that happened in the previous session is the characters learned that the key that they were seeking to the vault was around the neck of a guard drake by the name of Draco, who is a... guard drakes, if you don't know, they're, I think they were introduced in 4th edition. They're just kind of dragon-like creatures. This one I sort of described as being a cross between like a crocodile and a bulldog, right? It's squat. I was thinking of, I think his name is Bronx in Gargoyles, right? That one gargoyle that's like more like a dog than a person. Did they ever talk about that? How come Bronx isn't sentient? Is he a different species of gargoyle? What's the deal? Anyway, so this character, this monster, Draco, is running around the castle with this collar that has the key dangling from it. So they have to go track Draco down. They know Draco is always hungry, and so since the Dragon Slayers have been kicked out of the castle, Draco kind of has the run of the place, and he's to be found in the pantry. He's basically stuffing his face. So they'll need to go, and they'll need to like do animal handling and persuade Draco and get the key from him if they want to get into the vault. That's one of the things that will take up some time. One element I can introduce, another plot device that I used in this castle is that the Dragon Slayers weren't the original occupants. They came and took over the castle when they were sort of looking for a base of operations. And then in the catacombs of the castle are its original occupants. So there are all these graves of these ancestral skeletons that, you know, built the place, this knightly order that used to be here, whose name is since forgotten and whose deeds are since forgotten. They were the original builders of the castle. And when the Dragon Slayers took over, they were sort of seeking a means to push them out. And so the party managed to raise this skeleton army to help them defeat the Dragon Slayers and sort of push them into the sea. Most of the skeletons were destroyed in that battle, but I liked the idea of there being one kind of like straggler, that there's a mummy, maybe someone who's more important than the rest of the skeletons, who is, for some reason, much slower. You know, maybe he's only got one leg, maybe his body is twisted or malformed in some way that makes it hard for him to catch up. But I like the idea of this mummy kind of arriving late to the battle that was like 3 episodes ago and being like, is it too late to fight? And giving them this sort of old, forgetful, kind of geriatric undead character to mess with. I had this idea for a swimming pool, what would have been like a bathhouse in sort of a Roman context, or like a Roman bath. But of course, to add an extra layer on it, it is currently closed for maintenance. Because I like the idea the players might want to play in the swimming pool. The idea they have a castle that has a swimming pool. At least when I was a kid, that was always like the thing that was cool. Oh man, you went to the hotel and they had a pool, and like the swimming pool was a commodity. But of course, because it's D&D, you have to give them a little objective to overcome before they can interact with the pool. So I had the idea that it's like grimed over, right? That it's closed for maintenance and it's disgusting and no one's cleaned it in years, and it's now the habitation of a grell. This like horrible, it's the brain with the beak and the tentacles. So I liked the idea that, yes, you can swim in the swimming pool, but you'll have to get rid of this grell and clean the place up first before you have a chance to. And then lastly, the other room I designed was the observatory. Pretty basic, no actual encounter here, but I wanted to give them just like an unalloyed, cool thing that they can play with. So in addition to a bunch of stargazing equipment, there's also a big telescope that they can use essentially as a spyglass that lets them gaze wherever they want, sort of in the world. If they speak through the name, they can like seek out any location and, make a perception check with advantage to see what's going on there. So it could be a cool way for them to look into enemies or look into other locations, places they've been in the game before. But I'm now realizing as I'm saying this that it would probably be really good for them if they're trying to figure out more about the harmonic convergence. There could be texts about it up in there, right? There could be all kinds of instruments they could use to measure the convergence. Things like that could be kind of neat. Great, and then the very last thing, I don't know if you guys can see this, I'll keep scrolling down, is that I send out a survey to my players every week, basically to see like what they're interested in, what they would like to see in the game. Usually it's for things like, are you having fun? And what was the most fun? What was the least fun? That way I can kind of gauge how players are feeling about it. And so I've been collecting and collating that data from these surveys, and there are some of the players just never answer it, and that's fine. Some of the players answer every week and constantly add new things they want. Obviously way too many to the point where I can't always add those things, but I would like to try to find a way to start to incorporate some of these. So Plank, our trickster cleric, is one of the people who was always answering this survey every single time with some new thing that they're into. And so I would love to drip feed maybe one or two of those things. I've listed a couple of ideas here. A cool book we talked about, right? Something evil and sinister that they can pull out of the restricted section. He mentioned being interested in having a cult that worships him. It's a little silly, but I think I might have a hook for that, though I don't know if it's the proper time to introduce it. And then he has a weird gag where he has basically convinced first originally the Dragon Slayers as a means of infiltration, and now he's kind of like convinced himself of this. He posed as like a castle inspector to come in and look at it, gotta make sure everything is up to code, but now he has taken that role very seriously, and he thinks of himself as like the administrator of the castle. So he wanted some new plot line that involves his role as the castle's sort of superintendent, if you will. Great. So that's a lot of me talking, but that's basically where we're at with this adventure. Again, think of this as like a big playground for them to just sort of run around and do whatever they want. So if we can think of maybe 3 to 5 more elements that I can introduce, they can either be chambers in the castle that they have yet to uncover. They could be characters who arrive at the castle with, news or new items or whatever, right? Or they could be dangers or strange events or kind of random happenstances that can come along and get in their way. Great. Let me take a little drink after all that talking, and let's start breaking this down. So for the ship, I think there's a good chance that the party will turn around and deliver the bell to the Kraken to get their sort of custom vessel made. In that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a mechanic that I have employed with these kids before, where I will ask them like, okay, the Kraken, shipmaker, will allow you to each determine one feature about your new ship. So, you might say that you want it to have flaming catapults, or you might say that you want it to have magical mist that's constantly around it, or you might say that you want it to be able to fly, right? Usually those things, and I will take all of those and I will incorporate them into the story in some way. I will usually modify them. I'm not usually going to let like a ship just naturally fly or be invincible or something like that. It could be something they can turn on, like it can fly for an hour a day or something like that, right? But I find that's a really good way to get the kids engaged mentally, as opposed to me just saying, this is what happens, this is what you need. right? It's also gotten me out of jams before when I'm like, oh crap, I don't know what you need to do. There was in a previous session, the characters were trying to find this dwarven city that would have all this treasure in it, because all they care about is treasure and magic items and more power. And I didn't know, I knew it was a hidden city, and I knew that it was very difficult to get to. And so I just asked the kids, I said like, hey, there are 6 things, there are 6 players, 6 things you need to do to find this city. I want each of you to tell me what one of those things are. And they really got into it. They started to say, oh, I think that you have to jump off a mountain, or I think you have to get permission from a dragon. And one of the kids said you had to get a particular rare pearl that can only be found in one particular part of the world, right? And then after that one, the kids realized, they were like, wait, that means we have to do this stuff. Wait a minute. And they realized they had already set themselves up for this very difficult quest, which is exactly what I wanted. But the point is, I'd like to farm that stuff out to them. The vault, even, that they're going to go and unlock isn't going to be an actual... I don't have any treasure determined for that. They're going to be like a set amount of gold, 5,000 gold or 10,000 gold or whatever. But then they're going to be... I'm going to ask them, what are the 5 treasures that you guys find in the vault? You tell me what they are, right? A quarterstaff that does this or whatever. And then I will make them and give them to them. So that way, they don't have to fight over what the items are, and it's a lot less work for me, at least up front, to come up with ideas, especially if the kids don't like those ideas. So I think the ship will be similar, and I'm not too worried about that. I think that's going to be fine. So the next thing is the library. As we said, Plank has gained access to the restricted section, and I would love to think of a couple of spooky books. I know one of the ones he mentioned, he wanted to think of a... Oh, I got to be careful. I won't wiggle my setup here too much. Okay. There we go. He mentioned finding some text that would allow him to become a lich, right? So functionally the Necronomicon. Necronomicon. An evil text... evil text of undeath that allows its reader to transform themselves into a lich. So the trick with this is that obviously, you want that to be possible. If this is the direction that Plank wants to take his character, you want to let him do that. But you also don't want to actually fully embrace what a real lich in D&D is, right? You want to keep it sort of the... Kid-friendly is a bit of a stereotype, but you want to keep it sort of attainable. Tamed, almost, maybe, is a better way to think of it, right? It's not going to run wild and destroy the campaign, but he can still kind of get the effects of being a lich, or the feel of being a lich, if you will. And obviously it should come at some terrible cost. It shouldn't be something you can just, push a button and do. Normally, you'd have to be a spellcaster of a certain level, right, of a certain power. But I don't think that I want to gate it like that, because I think if what he wants is to be a lich, and he needs to be, 10th level or 11th level or 15th level or whatever to be a lich, then it kind of just dead ends. It's like you need to wait until this happens. So I could see it being that, it has instructions about how to construct a phylactery. Or a reliquary, I think, right? A reliquary. I'm trying not to use the word phylactery anymore because it's potentially offensive to Jewish people. So it's potentially a little anti-Semitic. So I'm going to go with reliquary. How to construct a reliquary, but it comes at some terrible cost. I like the idea that being a lich isn't inherently evil, right? This is an idea I've played with in previous games. I've even run games like epic level campaigns where we have good aligned liches. I think 4th edition talked about this notion, that it's not about necessarily being evil, it's about how being undead eventually makes you evil, right? That, you might start off as a lich with the best of intentions, but the longer that you are a lich, the more your sort of moral center decays, and eventually you turn, you live long enough and you don't see people as people anymore. It's kind of why I think elves are always a compelling villain, because if you lived so long, right, it would sort of warp your perceptions of things, especially, people who don't live as long as you. So I like the idea that he is maybe capable of being a lich. Not now. It would definitely be like a quest, or something he would do down the line. But I want him to be able to like make steps to progress towards it if that's what his character wants. The thing is that there is a 95% chance that he is going to forget about these books, or that he is going to get tired of wanting to be a lich and he'll go off on some other quest. But I don't ever want them to feel like they can't do something. If they choose not to do it, okay, great, do something else. But I always want the option to feel like it's on the table. So it would be cool to think of, I think there's got to be like an initial thing with the Necronomicon where it asks some initial price from him, that like holding it, you know, every day, like he needs to attune to it, and whenever he's attuned to it, it drinks a little bit of his life, right? Yeah, so like attunement. When you attune to the Necronomicon, it drinks one of your hit dice. Draining away your vitality. I think it just stays there. Like you just permanently lose a hit dice as long as you're attuned to the Necronomicon. I don't think it's not cumulative. I don't think it like stacks. I think it's just it's gone, right? That's your life essence that it's like feeding on. Is a hit dice. Yeah, that's cool. You could make it, you know, cumulative, and you can only be attuned to it for 7 days or whatever, or 3 or 4 days, or however, whatever they're. I think they're 5th level. A lot of the party is actually very scattered in level because of the way I do XP with these guys. What do you think, Chad? Do you think it's more interesting if it's cumulative and then you can only be attuned for a couple of days and you have to kind of get rid of it? Or do you think it's just like, that's the tax? Like, by being attuned to the Necronomicon, you will always have 1 hit die fewer, right? Hit dice, they're useful, but they're not that useful. Most of the time, you know, I find short rests are really rare in D&D. I find that, like most of the time, if the characters are resting, they are doing a long rest. And maybe it's because I don't do a lot of dungeon crawls, but hit dice can occasionally be helpful, but even just losing 1 hit dice, not that big of a deal. So I like that. I think I like the notion that it is written in sort of like a maddening, unreadable script. Unreadable script. Perhaps attunement lets you read it. Perhaps not. I feel like I like the idea of having to like get over some initial hurdle. So Fast and the Furious. So you attune to it, and then there's still some difficulty you have to overcome. It isn't just, you know, now you can read it, now you can learn all the things you need to know. There's some sacrifice you have to make, or there's some, like, I think being like, opening it, you can't read it, right? But I think attuning to it gives you the ability to read it. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think before attunement, the Necronomicon is written in a maddening, unreadable script. Once attuned, you can read it fine. So I think the way it works is that study. The book is rambling and difficult to read and makes obscure references to things and people and places you've never heard of. Reading the Necronomicon takes 1 hour at a time. Requires a I think I like the idea of there being sort of 2 checks you have to make. I don't want to like overly mechanize it, but I like the idea that it's something he can sit down and do, right? and that it takes an hour to read like a chapter of it, and then maybe there are 8 chapters in the book, and there are 8 things he has to do to become a lich, right? So I would only need to come up with 1 or 2 of them, because he's only going to have an hour. He's only going to have 1 or 2 chances to sit down and read the book. But I think every time he reads a chapter, he has to make like an intelligence check or an investigation check to understand what's in the book, and then he has to make a wisdom save against going mad, right? Because the book is so, full of crazy ideas. If he fails the intelligence check, then he has to spend that. He doesn't learn the next piece of information that he needs, right? Requires an intelligence check. Intelligence check and a wisdom save. After 8 hours, character has read the entire book and knows the 8 steps required to achieve lichdom. So what are like 3 steps on the road to lichdom? Something with a phylactery makes sense. Excuse me, the reliquary makes sense. Step 3. So the traditional reliquary, here, I'm going to open up my monster manual. I might move my mic, so I apologize if it makes a weird noise. The traditional reliquary does a thing where you have to feed it souls, I believe. Right? Let me see how it works. Secrets of Undeath. No wizard takes the path to lichdom on a whim. Process of becoming a lich is a well-guarded secret, okay. Wizards that seek lichdom must make bargains with fiends, evil gods, or other foul entities. Many turn to Orcus, demon prince of undeath. His powers created countless liches. However, those that control... A lich is created by an arcane ritual that traps the wizard's soul within a phylactery. Doing so binds the soul to the mortal world, preventing it from traveling to the outer planes after death. A phylactery is traditionally an amulet in the shape of a small box, but it can take the form of any item possessing an interior space into which arcane sigils of naming, binding, immortality, and dark magic are scribed in silver. With its reliquary prepared, the future lich drinks a potion of transformation, a vile concoction of poison mixed with blood of a sentient creature whose soul is sacrificed to the reliquary. The wizard falls dead and then rises as a lich as its soul is drawn into the reliquary where it forever remains. So the kid-friendly version of that is that basically you put your soul in a box, right? And then while your soul is in the box, you can run around and do whatever you want, right? You can't be slain. You don't necessarily have to petition an evil god. You don't necessarily have to sacrifice someone to do it. I mean, you would, obviously, normally, but this is, we're talking about an 11-year-old. But I think the idea of saying that, like, if your soul is in a box, you can't be killed, you can't be hurt, is plenty for this version of lichdom. And then you end up looking like a skeleton or something. So, finding a reliquary, I think, is one of the things, right? Normally it says, yeah, you must periodically feed souls to its reliquary to sustain the magic, preserving its body and consciousness. It does this using the imprisonment spell. Instead of choosing one of its normal options of the spell, the lich uses the spell to magically trap the target's body and soul inside its reliquary. The reliquary must be on the same plane. A lich's reliquary can hold only one creature at a time. Creature imprisoned inside the reliquary for 24 hours is consumed and destroyed utterly, whereupon nothing short of divine intervention can restore it to life. A lich that fails or forgets to maintain its body with sacrificed souls begins to physically fall apart and must eventually become a demi-lich. Okay. So, 3 steps. Let's do... You must locate one. Yeah, Ernst. He is a fun, happy skeleton. I agree. Man, I miss Ernst. I miss that fellow. I think the implication is that, like, Ernst is feeding souls to his phylactery. You just don't see it. It's off screen. But yeah, right. You could do a thing where he falls apart. Oh, that's fun. Give the kid Ernst powers, right? That, like, it turns you into a skeleton, and then while Yeah, you're much more like Sauron, right? Where it's like, yeah, it's bad. It's not a good thing to do, but it's not this like overt sort of demonic evil that it's like portrayed as here. Yeah, I think that's fine. So I think the idea that you have to... What are some steps? You need to find something to be your phylactery, but I feel like that could be anything. So I want to make this a little bit more interesting. It has to be something that like is your most precious item, right? Yeah. So you have to designate your most precious item, whatever it is. Precious possession. You have to like concoct a potion is one of the steps. And you can make the point of like concocting the potion has various ingredients, right? Various steps involved. You guys probably can't see that, I'm now realizing. Is that better? Yeah, there we go. This is the thing, it's too small. I kind of thought it was weird to like, with my overlay, to have the thing come up too far, because then it's just like me over my block. I don't know, it's weird. Guys, my hair is so long. Oh my gosh, it's getting crazy. I think it's like you have to designate your like most prized possession, and you have to like perform some dark ritual to like gate it off, essentially. Or maybe you have to like carve a number of arcane symbols into the object. As described in the book. Into an object. I kind of think I'm going to have it drain 1 point of your hit dice every day. Every day at dawn, it drinks 1 hit dice. So there's like a clock on this, right? This requires an Arcana check. Arcana check required. And then you have to concoct a potion. So the idea is that like a higher level spellcaster can last longer while they're attuned to the Necronomicon, right? You can give it up, you can not attune to it, you can just leave it somewhere and it will, you know, or bring another item and you can break attunement with it. Yeah, I think that's cool. I think that's plenty for now. We'll just do 1 step for the moment. But I'll have like concoct a potion there as a potential thing. We can come up with like some interesting ingredients as well. Okay, so in terms of the books, I think the Necronomicon is the one he's actually looking for. He's trying to become a lich. I think if we can come up with like a much thinner kind of like just a concept for like maybe 2 or 3 more books, then that will feel like, okay, there's some stuff in the restricted section. I've obviously thought about this. So there's the Harry Potter one, right? There's like the book that screams at you. The book with a banshee whale inside. Opening the book causes it to scream. Opening the book makes it scream. Or when opened, the book screams. Requiring, I think it's charisma saves. Why can't I type? Charisma saves. On a failure, the target drops to 0 HP. Ooh, a book that steals knowledge is really good. Yes. Maybe it steals spell slots. A book that steals knowledge. What are like, yeah, let's do a quick table. So like names, spells, memories. I mean, maybe it's just spells. I kind of like, I mean, I guess then it wouldn't affect someone who, it wouldn't affect somebody who isn't a spellcaster, which I kind of like. Like a fighter could just pick it up and read it. Yeah, that's interesting. Ooh, int points. Yes. Yeah. The person who reads it. So I think yeah, it's an intelligence save. That's cool. Intelligence save on a failure. The character loses like 1 point of intelligence. Not 1. We're gonna make it a little bit more than that. Yeah, it really doesn't do much permanent ability damage. I kind of think it's interesting, though. You know, I really like the way they do the Intellect Devourer. Maybe that's the way. Maybe it basically just functions like an Intellect Devourer. Because it's like you roll 3d6, and if it's higher than that, then your character just like goes comatose. But the problem with that is that like you can't play that character anymore, right? Like until it gets healed. And these kids do not like to heal each other. They just don't do it. So I could see like an inquisitive player picking up the book and trying to interact with it, and then getting penalized for doing so, and then just being out of the game. So I think it's more fun if it takes some of your intelligence, but not all of your intelligence, right? And then I can find some in-narrative thing, like you lose spells, or you don't remember anyone's name, or you forget how to read, or something like that, right? Like you lose some obvious thing. Maybe even lose skills. That's interesting. Yeah, what about skills? I think it takes intelligence points, and then I think you lose skills or spells. Yeah, not permanent D4. Loses 1 D4 intelligence. Yeah, that's right. And may suffer additional narrative or mechanical penalty. Like, I'll just kind of keep it. I'll play it by ear, right? Like, if I feel like the kid is really upset about it, I might not necessarily take it away, but like, I think skills is interesting. Skills or spells. I like a book that's like chained up and tries to bite you. To bite you, presumably a bestiary. Is that a Harry Potter one too? That feels Harry Potter. Let's come up with like one more, because then we got 5. A book that steals knowledge is so good. Yeah, it does the opposite, right? A book that's like a portal is interesting, right? That opening it like takes you to some terrible place, like a portal to the Shadowfell. A book that steals your soul, a book that drives you mad. We kind of already have with the Necronomicon, right? A book that possesses you. They're monster manual attacks, yeah. Calling it the monster manual is kind of cute, though. We've done a lot of possession, so I don't necessarily want to do a possession book. I kind of like a book that opens a portal. A book that opens a portal to the Shadowfell. And you can have it be like the Upside Down, right? In Stranger Things, where they're like in, or maybe even like the ethereal plane, where they're like trapped. Yeah, I think the ethereal plane is kind of interesting. Trapping the character there. Yeah, that's cool. Maybe it's a Jumanji thing. The book must always have one person trapped inside. Ooh, yeah. So they see, like, the cover has, like, a Dorian Gray style, like, I'm a guy. And they open it, and that guy comes out, like, oh, I've been stuck in there for 400 years. And then the player is stuck in it now, and then they always have to try to, like, it has to have someone in it, right? Like, cool, I like that. Ooh, a book of false divination. That's cool. A book of false divination. I'm trying to figure out how that would work. Because how do you predict things that... Because, like, a book that predicts things that won't happen isn't necessarily terrible. Right? It says this will occur, but then it doesn't. Book of False Divination. Because I think that the party is, like, inherently going to be suspicious of any book they pick up from the restricted section, right? So it seems difficult to imagine that they would believe. You could do a charm thing, right? It could, like, charm them into believing that this will occur. Yeah, I don't hate that. Yeah, like I was holding the sky up. Exactly, David. Someone always has to be doing it. Hey, what's up, Shadowner? The opposite happens? Yeah, that could be it. The opposite happens. Yeah, I'll put it down. I think it's interesting. I feel like I have to, like... Okay, yeah. Shows, like, tells... Gives clues about something, but it's actually the opposite. Yeah, I think it's cool. I think I might... I'll say that I'll put that one in my back pocket, because I feel like it's... The amount of work it would require would be such that it might be difficult to do on the fly. But I like the idea of having it ready, right? That, like, it talks about... You know, a great treasure, or it talks about, like, a wonderful thing that's going to happen, and then the opposite occurs. There's a good talk about, like, the convergence, right? I think it's interesting. But again, it would just have, there's no convergence. Okay. So I think that's good for books. You have, like, 6 books. That's plenty. Yeah, I love it. Okay, cool. Let's jump on to remaining rooms. So this is just generally, kind of for the rest of the stream here. I'm probably going to go for another hour, maybe half an hour, depending. I want to just think about, like, what are some other things that the party could encounter in the castle, right? Gives the DM the portent ability. Ooh, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, that's cool. Gives the DM the portent ability. When they read the book, they roll 3 d20s. I am then allowed to swap their rolls with those d20s. Or monster rolls, right? Yeah, but it gives it to me. That's really cool, David. I love that. Nice job. Cool. So let's think of, like, I just want to have a handful more little plot things we can play with. So we've established that there's a vault, and that the treasure inside the vault is nebulous, in the sense that, like, it's not, it's like, it exists in the story, but I'm just gonna ask them what it is. So I'm trying to think, like, is there anything else in that vault they could interact with? Does opening the vault lead them to some new plot, right? Is there someone trapped in the vault? Is there a golem that tries to fight them if they steal from the vault? Is there, you know, we've established that the bell tower, the one that has the bell that they're looking for, is past the vault. They have to go through the vault to get to the tower. So there could be something up there in the bell tower. It also rings, the bell rings at particular points. Just like, what are some other, at the end of this seems very vague and very big, but, like, I'm trying to think of other little kind of plotless, like, hooks, like premises that I can throw at them, you know? I like the idea of tying it to the vault, because they are definitely going to open the vault. So if they go and open the vault and get their treasure, the notion of that immediately leading to a new quest or a new plot or a new something that they can interact with. And it could be something as simple as an encounter. You know, like, I was debating doing, like, we've done a lot of elementals, but I kind of like the idea of the gold being animated, like like the horde is animated. A fragment of an artifact. That's kind of cool. Yeah, so let's put vault. 5 undetermined magic items. And then a fragment of an artifact. One they could potentially reassemble. And they could, like, go to the library to learn about it, right? That's cool. I think for an encounter, I kind of like the idea that like the treasure. So the person who ran the castle before they wiped her out was sort of paranoid and megalomaniacal. So I like the idea that the gold has an enchantment on it. Like I like the notion of them having to fight like a water elemental, right? But that's actually like an animated gold, right? That they go to loot it and it attacks them. I kind of think that's cool. Oh, we got ambulances coming in. The treasure hoard. So the items, and the items like floating in it, that's kind of neat. Here, one sec, guys. And attacks them. Yeah, exactly. The treasure hoard is its own guardian. It protects itself, right? And you could like grab handfuls of it, you know, because it's just gold. But I like the idea that all of the coins and all the magic items are animated and they defend themselves. I don't know how you defeat it, right? Like maybe there's one item inside there that's kind of like its heart, and if you can destroy that, like a crystal or something, an orb, if you can destroy that, then it will de-animate the gold. Let me look up the water elemental and just see if that mechanically is actually going to work for me. So what is this artifact? What fragment of an artifact do they find here? And where can they go to get more fragments of it? Oh yeah, that's good. Water form. So it doesn't have freeze, certainly. Yeah, whelm will still work. It's like it moves into their space, they make a strength saving throw. If they fail, they take bludgeoning damage. If it's larger or smaller, it's grappled. They make the point that the target is restrained and can't breathe. I think you could still breathe, but you'd be restrained. And then it's just like it crushes you, right? You can feel all the treasure smushing you. Because I thought about doing an earth elemental, but I think that's more of like a golem. I like the idea that the gold kind of like flows across the ground and overwhelms you, and it's more like a liquid than it is a solid, even though it's made of solid. It's like an amorphous solid. That's cool. What's this artifact? So they have already encountered like a lot of the big classic artifacts. It would be cool if this artifact was a good thing, because they have encountered Crenshinabon, they have encountered the Orb of Dragonkind, they've encountered the Sword of Kos. They've seen the Hand and Eye of Vecna, the Wand of Orcus, a bunch of these things. They basically, one of their early adventures was that they were tasked with guarding a vault full of incredibly powerful, evil magical items. And they managed to walk off with a couple of them. One of them was a Sword of Kos, which they purified to make it a good sword, and then one of them was Crenshinabon, which has since escaped of its own power. So I like the idea of a fragment of an artifact, because it gives them like, hey, this is a thing. I was ragging on this earlier today, but there's the Rod of Seven Parts, right? Like, I don't really know anything about it. Is that in the DMG? Let me go check. I'm still here, but I'm gonna go grab my book. Because, like, it having different parts is interesting. I don't necessarily know that they would care if it's... I don't necessarily know if they would care unless they can use the individual parts, right? Like, they might think it's more interesting if they can get everything together. Ooh, what about, like... What about, like, a Jaeger? You know, like a massive stone colossus that they can pilot around. And there's like a piece of it in here. It's a little silly. It would be like its hip or like its arm or something. Well, the problem is that and then they can't use it right now. They might get really excited about the prospect of finding it, but maybe they just wouldn't care at all. So maybe it's better to have it be something a little bit more usable. So let's look at these artifacts. There's the Axe of the Dwarvish Lords, which who really cares about that? I mean, like, you know, it's cool, but it's not necessarily what I need. The Book of Exalted Deeds, the Book of Vile Darkness. I feel like I don't want to do another book. The Hand and Eye of Vecna, the Orb of Dragonkind, the Sword of Kos, and the Wand of Orcus. So most of these artifacts are particularly bad items, right? And we've already established where they are in this campaign world. The keys. Yeah, the keys to it. That's funny. I mean, we can make up an artifact right now, right? Like, what does it do? What's its thing? I kind of want to like roll on these tables and see like if we come up with anything cool. Because these are just like properties. They're not necessarily, you know, meant to be, this is all the artifact does, but that might help inspire us. So let's roll. Okay. So I'm going to give it 2, I'm going to give it a minor beneficial property. 8 is, while attuned to this artifact, you gain proficiency in one skill of the DM's choice. Okay, pretty boring. We're going to give it 2 major ones. 77 is, while you are attuned to this artifact, other creatures can't take short, or that's detrimental. Oh, never mind. Oh, just recreate spells. That's not that interesting. I thought these tables were better. Oh, here's a couple of other sentient things. There's like Black Razor, Whelm, and Wave. Yeah, I don't know. This is not interesting me. Guys, what do we think is a cool artifact that you could break into pieces that they could maybe slowly start to like reassemble? Yeah, I mean, the Rod of 7 Parts seems to make sense. I'm gonna look it up really quick. Oh, is that messing with your guys' thing? Yes, it is. Let me pull that off of there. There we go. The Rod of 7 Parts. Yeah, they're very, meh. The Rod of Law. They also like don't seem to do anything. What are their powers? The Rod of 7 Parts are boring. A Trident is cool, but again, it feels like it's got to be like a piece of something. A piece of a Trident. I like the idea. I think until something strikes us, I want to maybe move on. Because I like the notion of them, like, you have to collect all the Chaos Emeralds or whatever, right? That they have, like, a long-term goal. I think that's cool. But we got to figure out, like, what that thing is. What they would be interested in. So let's maybe move on. What are some other things that they can encounter in the castle that they might enjoy messing around with? We have a couple of NPCs. I wouldn't mind like one more NPC. Yeah, basically the Infinity Gauntlet. Like you're not wrong there, dude. It's something like that because it's kind of about the collection of it. I don't think it, because if it's just one of the stones, you know, it doesn't imply. I mean, maybe it's the gauntlet. You know, I don't know if it's an actual gauntlet, but maybe it's like a holster for these gems, these items, and then it's like, well, it doesn't work unless you have all the pieces. That's not bad, David. That's not bad. Crown of Elemental Control. Is that a thing? Crown of Elemental Control. Or did you invent that? Crown of Elemental Mastery, Ring of Elemental Command. But that's kind of interesting because then it's like, and you could put like gems in them, right? Like, I don't hate that idea. A Crown of Elemental Control. The problem with a crown, I mean, it's also the same problem with a gauntlet, right? Like, is that it's obviously one item that one person gets to use. So I feel like it'll inevitably turn into who gets it, right? But I think that's kind of inevitable regardless of what item we choose. I like that hook, though. Not a thing in 5e. I like that idea, though, guys. I think that's close to it. Elemental Control is cool. Because then you get kind of this avatar thing, right? Like you could make the gems individually do different things. And so they could say like, hey, you could just keep the gem and let yourself do a cool thing, right? Or you could put them all together Captain Planet style into this crown. I kind of like that. And I like the idea of the crown being empty and being useless. But there's something about it, right? Like it's obviously magical, but it has no inherent properties. And so the existence of the crown, especially too, if I make this point that like there are 5 treasures here, right? And also a crown. That will make it seem like it's kind of standing out. Like, well, what's the deal with this crown? You know, it requires these 5 gems or whatever, you know, and you have there be a number of gems equal to the member of the party, number like the players in the party. So there's like a fire one and a water one and maybe a lightning one and an earth one and an air one, right? Yeah, something more like Captain Planet. That person will use it once per week. Oh, sure, then they trade it around. That's cool, David. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's talk about this. So I liked your phrasing, Crown of Elemental Control. I kind of like Mastery. Crown of Elemental Mastery. Elemental Mastery. A blank golden crown. Yeah, this is great, guys. A blank gold. Thanks for coming out on Tuesday afternoon. You know, I'm still kind of figuring out if this is a good time. Blank golden crown with 5 empty gem slots. Ooh. Oh, man. Do you know what you could do? You could put those gems on the different elemental planes, right? Because they're about to go through them all. I mean, different party, yeah. But the problem with doing that is that, like, then some of the characters will want the gems more than other, like, yeah, because of the weird nature of the parties, that might not be a good idea. It's possible. I could maybe do it, but it's more about, like, how the parties are divided up. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. 5 empty slots where missing gems can be inserted. Each gem corresponds to an elemental power. Those gems grant spell-like abilities. To their wielders. Altogether, the crown is much more powerful, but drains the user, meaning they cannot use it more than once per week or whatever, yeah. Intricate runic embellishments in different dialects. That's cool, yeah. Carvings around each rune, around each slot. Oh, you gotta do it like in Auran, in Terran, in Ignan, and in Aquan, and Aquan? I don't know what the other one is. Because there are 5 of them, and it feels like it should be the 4 elemental planes. You could do, like, Shadow or something. You could do Heart. You could just literally have it be Captain Planet. And having, like... Because I can see them getting Heart and the Feywild, right? Like... Okay, let's break down this idea of... Is this... Okay, you know what? I'm going to do that later. Let's focus on other stuff that the party can do. So they'll find the Crown of Elemental Mastery, right, in the vault, and then it's a question of, like, going and researching about it. Where do they find those things? I mean, I guess that's the next question, right? Like, so yeah, let's talk about it. Let's dive in. So if they're about to go on harmonic convergence and they're about to go through all of these different portals, right, into these different realms, it seems silly not to have the gems be available in these places, right? Because it's so clean, it's such a nice lineup. The problem is that the parties are going to be mixed up when they go through harmonic convergence. So half of the players will know about the gems and the other half will not. And so there is a good chance that some of the players that don't know about the gems will end up with the gems just because they're around, right? And then the players who need the gems will never get the gems because, right, they they're separated. So it's this thing where, like, if I establish that they're in the planes, which I think makes the most sense, and we're about to do this thing, right? Yeah, I don't want to end up in a scenario where, like, a character who can't use the gem in the crown ends up with the gem of water, and then, you know, that's that. The one party can never get the crown together because this other person in the other party has the gem. This is the weird thing with two parties, man. It's crazy. A force magical elemental, or that might be too much like air. Occasionally magic item recipe is a good follow-through hook as well. Yeah. So I think you could make it that, like, they're found there, but that's not the only place you can get them. Then maybe they're not like the Infinity Stones in the sense that those are the only ones that exist. Maybe you can find multiple versions of them, but they're only going to, but they're still rare. So if they go to the elemental plane of fire, right, and one of the characters who isn't in this party, who's in the other party, gets a hold of a fire gem, then they just have a fire gem, and it's cool, and it's a magic item, and that's great. Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. It isn't like these specific gems, it's that there are particular gems that can be found, and there are multiple versions of them, yeah. Where are the gems found on the elemental planes? Are the gems found on the elemental planes? And I like that too, because that means that the Shadowfell and the Feywild are kind of like detours. That's not where they really want to go. They don't need to go there to get them. They just ended up there, right? That's cool. Yeah, elemental gems can be made in an elemental node or obtained from Elemental Guardian X, yeah. They form in rare elemental nodes, which is cool because then it gives me some direction of stuff to design for the planes when they go through them. Or obtained from rare elemental guardians. Honestly, Shadowrunner, it kind of sounds like an opportunity to bring Patient Monolith back. Oop. They form, right? How do I know this wasn't your plan the whole time to bring back Patient Monolith? Yeah, I think that's cool. So they know, because then what I like about that too is that if they go through all those steps, right, of like they get the crown and they do the research on the crown and they recognize it, and then they go to the library and research where they can find these gems, then they know they're in the elemental planes. And then when they get pulled into the elemental planes, it's like, oh, we should look for those gems, right? It gives them a thing. They don't have to. There's no, like, penalty if they don't. But I think that's kind of cool. There can also be lesser stones then, like they summon mephits. Yeah, that's cool. I think that's neat. Yeah, I think that they grant you, like, basically a suite of spell-like abilities. You know, and because there are plenty of elemental spells. That's not hard to come up with. Oh, sorry, hair. That's not hard to come up with. It's like, you know, you would get something like, yeah, exactly. You've been waiting this whole time, Shadowrunner. You knew this was gonna come up. But you know, there's like shape earth, or it's like form earth, and shape water, and create fire, and you know, there's simple cantrips, and then, you know, you can also do first level attacks, and then you can do, you know, moving on to higher stuff, earthquake and fireball and cone of cold. Ooh, ice is good too. That's interesting. I suppose that the water one might have to be ice, although I bet that there's enough. There's like orb or wall of water. Yeah, there's at least one cantrip for each element. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So I think that's good. I want to maybe move on and come up with a couple of other, like, back of my pocket things that the party could encounter in the castle. just because I think this will be good and this will be a lot of their time, but I want to make sure that if they for some reason don't go for the crown or don't get interested in it, which is very possible with these players, that they have other stuff that they can engage with, that I'm throwing things at them. So I kind of want just like a few more random things. Like I like the idea of like somebody shows up at the castle, right? Oh, let's talk about the wish list. So the cool book we have, there's the cult and there's the new plot line. So the cult, my thought here, again, this player wanted to have a cult that was devoted to them for kind of no reason. They didn't like do anything to deserve having a cult devoted to them. But Plank was briefly attuned to the crystal. And so I like the idea of like a weird, ragged cult of the crystal. And when I say the crystal, I mean Crenchinnabon, the crystal shard. He was briefly attuned to that. So I like the idea of like a ragged bunch of cultists showing up at his door and saying, you know, you are the wielder of the crystal, you know, we are here to do your bidding. And the joke is that like they don't realize that he doesn't have it anymore because he lost it. So that's kind of fun. It's like, here's your cult, but not exactly, right? And then it's about like fooling them into thinking that he still has the crystal. So let's do that. I can write that down. That's a pretty simple one. And that's just maybe, and I think that's just like a back of my pocket encounter, right? 3 pathetic cultists arrive, believing, devoted to the crystal shard. And believing that Plank is still its wielder. If he tells them that he doesn't have it, they are disappointed and go home. And it's just like clearly like, aww. And go home. Do they maybe have... I know he wants to get it back, so, like, do they perhaps have a means to track it? Yeah, I like that. Yeah, animated item like a painting. That's cool, Shadowner. So we have a... there's a dragon that's imprisoned as a mural in one of the rooms. For complicated plot reasons, the characters like went through this whole rigmarole of getting a remove curse spell that they could cast on the dragon to get it out of its state as a painting. But because the bad guys still have an orb of dragonkind, they decided not to do it because they didn't want the dragon to turn against them. So I have a painting, but I like the idea of like an animated item or an object. Like my instinct is like a suit of armor or something like that they can interact with. Yeah. What kind of story can you do with an animated suit of armor? Because that feels very like kind of Disney castle, right? Like, that seems like a fun character to play, right? That they can't talk, but they can just gesture. I think the kids would like that. So it can be evil, right? It can be like trying to possess them, like get them to wear the armor and then it steers them around, which, it can know something about the castle. Like maybe there's a danger to the castle. Yeah, maybe there's like a security system or something that like when the queen, the person that they defeated, was defeated, it tripped some alarm, right? And now the like the suit of armor knows about it, but can't tell them. It has to just like point to it. Yeah, that if they play Simon Says with opens the secret door. Yeah, I think there's something like that. I like the idea that it's like an NPC. This is like a suit of armor. Simply mirrors a PC that touches the door first. There's something kind of fun about it. It's just silly. Like it doesn't actually have like a plot behind it. Because again, we're looking for like distractions. You know, we're looking for like these are just things I can play with. Yeah, that's neat. Because I wonder if there's a way to turn that Shadowner from it mimics them to like they can control it, right? If they think about it that way, like if they position it right. You guys ever seen the movie Colossal? Animated armor. 2 suits of animated armor that, when activated, perfectly mimic the movements of the... Yeah, fighting it gets really tough. That's cool. Perfectly mimic the movements of the person who activated them. Disadvantage on stealth. But like you could like do such a thing where you could position yourself in such a way where if you attack something, they both attack that thing, right? Like you could manipulate it, but I think it's as helpful as it is harmful. That's kind of fun. I like that. Yeah. Advantage on stealth. Disadvantage on attack rolls because it's like perfectly mimicking you. But possible to manipulate. Can only be lifted with a remove curse spell. Okay, that's great. Let's see. What's like another room in the castle that they could go and explore? Let's come up with like 2 more things. Let's see. They could go. We have a library. We have like a banquet hall. We have an observatory. We have like a smithy, a forge. We have like a swimming pool. I'm trying to think of like, is there like kind of an anachronistic thing? Like I don't want to say like a bowling alley, but you know, is there something like that? Some sort of a like recreational, somewhat anachronistic. It wouldn't be like an arcade, but like, you know what I mean? Like something that's a little kind of Terry Pratchett, sort of silly in tone that they can mess around with. Yeah, there's anti-life shell protecting or something. Yeah, that's true. That's cool. They can get in. I like that. Because I like the idea that like they follow them around. Oh, you're saying, Shadow, that it, like if you try to get through a door, because I kind of like the idea that it just whatever you do, it just does, right? That it's like you go and you open the door. And then both of the 2 statues animate, and now they're like following you around. I guess it doesn't like prevent you from going in. But yeah, they're like standing in front of the door, and then if you try to move away from it, it just perfectly blocks you. It's kind of cool. Yeah, we'll figure it out. It's one of those 2. Maybe my idea was too complicated. But then it's basically a question like, what's beyond that door, you know? A ball pit is very funny. Yeah, a ball pit. But like, how? Like, what's the like? Because we have a swimming pool, right? So like, what's the castle justification for there being a ball pit? Ball pit's very funny. You know, my instinct is that it's like a trap, right? It's like a what if it's like a skull pit? I guess we already have all the skeletons. But I'm trying to think if there's like a reason they would put balls in there instead of, you know, spikes. Ball pit. Bowling alley. I like the idea. I can't frame it. Beyond there's just a room with a ball pit, which like honestly kind of funny. That might be it. It might just be that there's just a room with a ball pit in it, and there's like no. It's pretty absurd. I kind of like that. And there's just like no explanation about it. Yeah, there's a ball pit. Oh, a gelatinous cube depository? A gelatinous cube feels good. Yeah, they're gonna have like a janitor. Gelatinous janitor. Ooh, a mirror maze is good. Characters. Yeah, the characters encounter a broom closet. Unleashes a gelatinous cube. Roams the halls. I don't know that it's sentient. I think it's like a Roomba. You know, I just think it goes around and just collects up stuff. I kind of like the idea that it has like broom closet stuff stuck in it. So there's a broom and there's like a mop and there's like a bucket, you know, in the middle of it. So it kind of like you see these things floating down the corridor. That's kind of funny, I think. Ball pit is still very funny to me, like an inexplicable ball pit. And it's not a trap. It's just like you open a door and then there's a room with a ball pit and that you can just play in it. And it doesn't have any mechanical purpose. It doesn't have any narrative purpose. There just is a ball pit in the castle. You open a door and yes, there's a ball pit. And maybe the like the clue that leads you there is a few stray balls rolling on the floor. That like, you know, someone, you know, they always kind of get loose and there's like a few that are rolling around. Yeah, that's funny. A mirror maze. I kind of want to do like a hedge maze almost, you know? There is a magic mirror in one of the rooms. So you could do a mirror maze. I'd like the idea of like a mirror that pulls you into it, right? Yeah, we've established there's at least one of those. So maybe there's like a mirror version of the castle. Mirror castle. By gazing into a particular mirror in the castle, you step through into a mirror version of the castle. What's different in there, though, right? Like, so when they're, that was very much what the other mirror was like. They encountered this princess, and she was up in the up in her, like, locked in her bedroom, and she was like basically hiding in her mirror. That she could step into her mirror into a perfect copy of the her bedroom inside the mirror. So if you extrapolate that out to the whole castle. You know what? I don't know if we need that. That's too much. I don't mind the idea of like a maze. A go-kart track. Trying to cast spells in Mirrorland. Oh, because it comes back at you? That's interesting. Oh, that's not what I want. Gazing at a particular mirror in a castle, you step through into a mirror version of the castle. I just feel like we kind of already have that, right? Like, I think that idea of like casting spells inside the mirror dimension, cast them back at you, like everything is reversed, is interesting. But I think the way into that is through the mirror in the princess's room. I think if we do the ball pit, that's got to be the only like goofy, illogical thing, right? Like, I don't mind the idea of a go-kart track, but I think it's got to be something that we can kind of justify, right? Like mine carts or something like that. And we know that there are like catacombs beneath the castle, so maybe there's like a minecart track down there. Minecart track. Beneath the castle, in the catacombs, is an expansive minecart track. Vehicle proficiency is used to steer. And it's clear that somebody used them to race. Like a starting line, like chevrons painted on the walls, you know. A checkered flag that, like, it's the intention is that you're supposed to race, that like someone was sneaking down here to do that. Okay, I think that's plenty. I doubt we're gonna get to half of these, but I love having them, right? So that way they're ready to go if we need them. Okay, cool. I think that that's probably good for me, y'all. So this is plenty of stuff for next session, for them to run around, and then it ends with the harmonic convergence where they get like pulled into the different planes. I'm hoping that they're really attached to the crown of the elemental crown thing. I think that's going to be cool, and it feels like it gives that harmonic convergence like narrative function as opposed to just like here's a random thing that happened, right? I almost want to find a way to make there be something else that the other characters are looking for in the elemental plane in the other party, but that's maybe a conversation we will have next week when we talk about that. Great. Yeah, this is fun. And there's the Kraken to deal with. There's like so much. This is tons. So I am well pleased. I think we have a lot to play with here. Okay, great. Yeah, well that's going to conclude this week's episode of Adventure Prep. We will be back next week with another session. We'll probably be preparing for for the next party. They're in a completely different part of the world doing something completely different. They will also get sucked into the portal and kind of scattered across the plains. But we will talk about what they're up to next week. I would love to find some way to tie them into the convergence in the same way we've done with these people. Maybe that they're not looking for the gems necessarily, but that they have some other kind of sub-objective on those planes. I think that could be really cool. Simple alchemy ingredients could be fun. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we'll talk about it. Yeah, I think that's neat. They do already kind of have a quest, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Great. Well, I know that those of you who are in the chat right now already know this, as you guys are both friends and fans and followers and patrons. But if you're watching this on the VOD, if you like this stream, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. And you'll see lots of other stuff. I do weekly world building streams on Sundays, and I do these Adventure Prep streams here. I also have a Twitch channel, which you can check out. It's twitch.tv/xbwebseries. You can follow us on Twitter at xbwebseries, and you can subscribe to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/xbwebseries. If you find us there, we would really love to have your support. That's kind of what keeps this content possible, is people who either donate to Patreon or who hire me to be a dungeon master, because I am a professional dungeon master. So all of our links should be below in the description. Check those out if you're interested in helping support the channel. But otherwise, I will see everybody next week. Thank you so much again for your creativity, both David and Shadowrunner, for coming and hanging out. And we will be back next week. Thanks again.